Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 21st, 2020 meeting of the Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District Board of Directors. I will start the meeting this morning with a roll call. Director Sarkar.
Here.
Thank you. Director Limburger will be joining us late. Director Parodi is absent at this meeting. Director McQuarrie.
Here.
Director Sheeler.
Present.
Director Tabor.
Here.
And Chair Davis is here. We do have a quorum. We'll start the meeting with a report regarding the posting of the agenda, please. Christina, Madam Clerk.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The agenda was posted on Friday, September 17th, 2021 at MTD's administrative office, mailed and emailed to those on the agenda list and posted on MTD's website.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Takes us to the consent calendar. There are two items on this morning's consent calendar. Item 4 is the approval of the prior minutes for the meeting of September 7th, 2021. Item 5 is the cash report for the dates August 28th through September 10th, 2021. Are there any questions or comments on either of those two items at this point? Director Sheeler, go.
Thank you, Chair Davis. One question. This had to do with something I hadn't seen before on cash reports, and this was vandalism supplies. Maybe if there could just fill in, was there some vandalism, and were there MTD cameras available to record that?
I can answer the question. From time to time, there is vandalism that occurs on board the vehicles or at a facility. I'm not exactly sure which supplies it's referencing there. It could be the vandal guards, which go on the windows to kind of protect them from etching, that sort of thing. But there are, from time to time, there are things that we do have to keep a supply.
Yeah, the vendor was Snag Wolf Incorporated.
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you on the specifics, but from time to time, we will look at cameras the best of our ability to try and identify what transpired, but things do occur and we do have to keep a supply.
Sure, understood. Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, I have a motion from Director Tabor. Do I have a second? I'm waiting. No seconds. Oh, I'll second it. No,
I can second.
Okay, Director Sarkar, thank you very much. I'll do a roll call on that on the consent calendar. Motion by Tabor, second by Sarkar. We'll start right at the top with Argent. Director Sarkar.
Move to approve.
Director Limburger is late. Director Parodi is absent. Director McQuarrie. Yo, Chuck, you're out there somewhere. Okay, I will move on to Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
Chair Davis votes yes. The minutes are approved with, I'll try Director McQuarrie one more time. Chuck, are you out there?
Chair Davis,
Yes.
I see a hand raised in the attendees. E. Howard Green. I don't know if he wants to comment on this item or he's getting ahead for the public comment.
Okay, well, I'm going to make the assumption is for the public comment, and if it's not, we'll come back and we'll get here. But right now I have a vote of 4-0 with 1 abstention and 2 absent. Okay, so let's move on then to public comment, and let's see if Mr. Green is speaking under public comment.
Yes, am I okay or not?
Yes, I hear you, Mr. Green. You sound well. You sound good.
Hey, thank you. I have several comments. I haven't been here for a while. The bus system seems to be working very well, so there's been nothing to comment on. However, there's something on your agenda that I wouldn't be able to speak on because it's after your closed session. And I'm wondering if you can consider in the future having that director's report which is not the general manager's report, but the director's activities before you exit for the closed sessions in the future. That's one item. Another is the credit card tap and pay system is starting to get publicity. It's in the transit guide. There are now those 3x8 glossy handouts at the transit center at the cashier. And so my concern is what arrangements or planning is being done for those who use 10 ride. Somehow the 10 ride should be accessible or be programmed in. I don't know how to implement it, but when the summer's around and I'm not in school, I'll have to pay, of course. And I don't want to pay $1.75. I don't want to pay $1.35. I want to pay 85. So that's probably a to-do. The only other item I have is the bus departure displays at the transit center. They're very nice. They are both an inward looking and an outward looking. Unfortunately, whoever set it up has 5 screens full of information. And it rotates every 20 seconds or whatever. So it's usable, but most people would care about the next bus out. So I think that the rotation should be, buses within 30 minutes or something. Or maybe there's not enough lines. I think there would be enough lines on there. Maybe design it so that the number 11 and the number 6 are on the same line. They shouldn't be, but they could be. Or it could show 11 o'clock and 11:30, which are the next times that would be. Of course, right now it would be 9 o'clock and 9:30. So it's a nice system. I'm sure that the programmers can handle what I'm saying. I think probably the specs that they were given were a little bit far-reaching. Thank you.
Chair Davis, you're muted.
Thank you for the reminder. It helps. Thank you, Mr. Green, for your comment. I'm sure staff will take all of those comments under consideration. That moves us on to item 7. This is the recognition of Lee Moldaver. Staff is presenting resolution 2021-05, honoring the memory of Lee Moldaver. Director Sheila, I'm wondering if you have that resolution in front of you.
Yes, Chair, I do.
I'd like to have you the honor to read that resolution into the record if you could.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay, this is a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Santa Barbara the memory of Lee Moldaver, resolution number 2021-05. Whereas Lee Moldaver served on the MTD Board of Directors in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s for a combined 20 years of service and remained a loyal bus rider and supporter of public transit throughout his life. And whereas, in addition to his love for public transit, Mr. Moldaver was a committed community volunteer and dedicated public commenter who engaged in countless organizations and efforts, including housing, land use planning, environmental protection, and land and wildlife conservation. And whereas a wealth of knowledge and community history, Mr. Moldaver often served as the institutional memory for local nonprofits and government agencies. Having been involved in so many community planning efforts in his life, always on hand and supportive, with flattering words for those doing work behind the scenes and on the front lines. And whereas Mr. Moldaver passed away on July 28th, 2021, and leaves behind a legacy of tremendous civic involvement, intelligent problem solving, and a friendly disposition. Therefore, be it resolved that the MTD Board of Directors recognizes and honors the memory of Lee Moldaver for his service to MTD and the broader Santa Barbara community. If passed, this would be adopted by the Board of Directors of the Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District this day, 21st day of September, 2021, by the following vote.
Thank you very much for reading that, Bill. I open the floor to any board members who wish to make any comment at this point.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr.
I
Taylor.
chime in, had a long relationship with Lee, served with him in the Citizens Planning Association. We worked together on the transportation element many years ago. Always had a smart comment, a sharp comment, and I was always did not want to follow him at the speaker's dais at any council meeting or planning commission meeting. Always made me sound a little dumber. He had a way with words, and I think everyone appreciated his involvement in the community.
Well spoken. Anyone else would like to make any comments at this point? I will say that I worked with Lee in various capacities for over 44 years. It's hard to imagine, but over 44 years, it's a long time. He was ubiquitous in everything that I ever got involved with in this community, from the city to nonprofits to even in my personal life. Lee was always there, and he leaves a great vacuum in a community of community involvement. He was quite a person. It's hard even to imagine that he's not here wishing.
Yeah. Chair Davis, do you mind if I make a quick comment?
Yeah, please do.
You know, I echo everything that's been said so far, and I'm so honored to be here making this resolution, putting this resolution into the
Computer off for a minute. Yeah, get off the internet, please.
Dave, there you go. Director Sarkar, if you wanted to finish your thoughts.
Okay, you can hear me?
We can.
Okay, so yeah, I'm honored that we're putting this into record, and Lee was always such a great supporter of so many, as you know, and for me, he really championed the times that, you know, all the interactions that we had over the years on the buses, or giving rides to him, or moving him around you know, at different events. He always was so supportive of myself and encouraged me in many ways, and was such a cheerleader for me through many years, as all of you have said. And since I'm so new on
I don't know.
since I'm so new on the board, I really am feel honored to be here, and I credit some of that to Lee for me being on the board.
Yeah, I'd like to add, on behalf of the staff, Lee was a tremendous inspiration to many of us who had the good fortune to work with him for so many years as a board member, but also as a bus rider full time. He really, pushed you to understand the service from all aspects, and he always advocated in a positive fashion, and he'll be missed.
Absolutely. Well spoken, everyone. Madam Clerk, do I have anyone who wishes? Oh, Dr. Director Sheeler, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up with this and just say, after the board of directors appointed me as the community member in 2012, Lee contacted me, and to talk about MTD, I needed a lot of bringing up to speed for sure. We met at Durf's, had a great conversation. I'd always known him from afar by watching him in his ubiquitous manner, saying things that really always impressed me. And there was a lot of virtual mentoring going on at that point. But after I got to be with MTD and be with him on other things like APCD, I could always count on being at a meeting and him asking me for a ride to the nearest bus stop. And I really always appreciated that. He was the superlative cheerleader for transit in our community.
Well spoken. Madam Clerk, do I have anyone who wishes to speak on this item? Director McCrory, do you want to say something?
Yes, everyone's pretty much covered all the good aspects of Lee. And I can tell you, when I was a staff member, he provided me plenty of opportunity, to put it in other words, to do things that were really well thought out. And he was really involved in development of some of our major projects with his suggestions, and indirectly led to development of what we then called the South Coast Transit Plan, which was something that ultimately was a good thing for MTD. And he was on the board at that time, and he was kind of a force behind it. So I really respected his intelligence. Sometimes he got under my skin a little bit, but it was a good thing. I really respected Lee, and he will be missed.
Thank you for that. Okay, Madam Clerk, anyone wishing to speak on this item?
I don't have any more public comments. I would like to say that
Yes, please.
he was always, this, I would never participate, but he was always so kind to me, especially coming into this role. The emails were always so encouraging and always brought a smile to my face. It really was a wonderful introduction to see him, him as a member of the public in a slightly different way. So.
Oh, thank you for that comment. I see that. Go ahead.
Oh, and no other public comments.
No public comment. Great. I see Director Lemberger has joined us. Good morning, Jen. We're on the item 7, the recognition of Lee Moldaver, the honorary resolution in that regard, and we're at the point of a motion. I'm actually going to ask Mr. Sheeler if he'd like to make the motion. Director Sheeler.
Thank you, Chair. With a lot of sadness and appreciation, I would like to move this motion forward. This resolution.
I have a motion from Director Sheeler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Tabor has seconded the motion. I will do a roll call vote. Director Sarkar.
Aye.
Director Lemberger.
Aye.
Director Parodi is absent. Director McQuarrie.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Director Tabor, Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
Chair Davis votes yes. The motion is approved 6-0 with 1 absent. We will miss Lee. Director Sheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Before we leave this item, I just had 2 questions, I guess, of staff and maybe the board. What is the district policy on naming? And if this were ever found to be appropriate, how would this be initiated?
Mr. Estrada.
Yeah, Chair Davis. I can't say there's an official policy on naming. However, if the board wants us to consider that or to explore that possibility, be happy to do so.
Let's bring that back for further discussion at some point. Thank you for that comment, Bill. That moves us then to item 8. This is the short range transit plan update. Mr. Estrada, Ms. Blackerby. Good morning, Hillary.
Good morning. I'm going to hand this right off to Hillary Blackerby, our planning and marketing manager, to lead the discussion. Hillary, it's all yours.
Thank you. And thank you, board, for that last item. David spoke about never wanting to follow Lee in public comment. And I'm pulling myself together after that last item. So having to follow the item about Lee, obviously, he was a tremendous individual and was always very supportive of me over the 18 years or so that I knew him. And so he's definitely missed. We know if we were meeting in person about this, he would definitely be here. With that, want to kick off the short range transit plan with you all. And I'm gonna we have a couple folks who are on our consultant team that I'm going to introduce. But first, just want to say, how did we get here? We were awarded a Caltrans Sustainable Communities Planning Grant and Transportation Planning Grant for the short range transit plan. Our previous one was a sort of 2015 to 2019. So we're a couple years behind, but we finally got that funding to do it. Earlier this year, you all awarded a contract to Stantec Consulting Services. So with me today is David Verbic, who's the lead on this project for Stantec, and then Gladys Cornell of AIM Consulting, who is a subcontractor on the contract to help with engagement and outreach strategies. And so I'm happy to have them here today. I'm going to pull up some slides, but first just want to say, this is a 5-year plan, not a 5-year process, but a 5-year plan that we're developing. But we will be kicking off our public outreach next month. And so this is sort of the first step in talking to all of you about the plan to make the plan. So with that, I will be sharing my screen, and I will invite David Verbic. He's going to handle most of these slides, but and then we'll kick it over to Gladys, and let me pipe in here a bit. We have all kinds of plans that we go through. This is a big important one to go out to the public to talk about our service, what they like, what they want to see differently, how we can sort of reimagine certain things. And then of course, that'll kick into our strategic plan that we'll look at here down the road. So with that, David, take it away.
Thanks, Hillary. Thanks for having us today. I think we can go to the next slide, and please interrupt me if anything is unclear, or if you can't hear me, or if I cut out. So this is just an overview of our presentation. So we'll go through project purpose and goals, our approach and schedule. We'll spend a bit of time, and Gladys will walk through our outreach approach, proposed outreach approach. Then we've started undertaking our existing conditions analysis. So we'll present some of the initial findings to you all. Then with next steps and questions and discussion, very much want to hear from the board and all of you. So the goals and the purpose of the project, really, as Hillary was saying, is to develop a short range, a 5-year transit plan to guide service development, infrastructure investment, capital needs. Throughout this process, we need to engage with the community, customers, and yourselves to really understand ways that we can better serve the community to attract more riders from diverse market segments. We know from the excellent survey you all did last year during the pandemic is you serve a substantial portion of essential riders who take transit regularly. So growing ridership from that segment is important, but also trying to attract more trips from occasional riders and other riders who may be missing. We also need to identify effective ways to provide service as we emerge from the pandemic. So we know that microtransit's already on your radar, something that you want to pilot next year. So looking at ways to align service delivery and operations with that demand, travel growth, also travel behavior changes that emerge from the pandemic. And importantly, we know from many transit agencies around North America that during the pandemic, with the reduction of traffic, a lot of agencies took advantage to look at bus priority treatments as a way to speed up buses, make them more reliable, and in that way attract more customers as a competitive mode to private vehicles. So this is something we want to explore with you as well. And as Hillary mentioned, this is going to align with the current strategic plan that you all have, plus lay the foundation for the upcoming planning sessions. And finally, we're going to develop service strategies that leverage the new vehicle technologies or investments in BEVs, battery electric buses, as well as the facilities master plan that sees a new facility out in Goleta that will help with some of the operational challenges. So the approach and schedule is as we mentioned, there's the existing conditions and analysis of operations and service, which is what we're undertaking right now. We've also started with the planning for stakeholder engagement round 1, which involves listening sessions and a brief survey. All that then gets compiled and we go through a sketch planning and draft planning for the development and design process of the service. Once we have a draft plan with recommendations and the network sketch, we go to round 2 where we do pop-ups, hopefully in person, and some online surveying and remix engagement so that folks can look at the plan, click around, and really understand what we're proposing, provide their feedback, and based on that feedback, we can revise and tweak the plan and then present it to you all for adoption. So that's the project approach in a nutshell. And the schedule follows a sort of similar sequence. You can see here that we kicked this off in mid-July, I believe, and we're now in September. So we're going through that existing conditions analysis. We've got the community workshops coming up, as well as, planning to have a draft a draft existing conditions report presented to you all in October. And then as we proceed through this project, hope to wrap this up in December of 2022. So now I'll pass it over to Gladys to discuss our outreach approach.
Thank you, David. I hope everybody can hear me. Okay, I got a thumbs up, great. My name is Gladys Cornell and I'm with AIM Consulting, and we are a exclusively stakeholder and community engagement consulting practice. We've been in existence for going on 17 years, and transit is one of our passions. So we are so excited to be part of this effort. David had asked me to just kind of walk through what the community outreach approach is going to be and highlight maybe some of the strategies that we're going to be implementing. I'd like to maybe start by just talking a little bit about an informational video that we're doing. I know that all of you are very interested and know what a short-range transit plan is. However, many community members maybe don't know what it is and wouldn't necessarily know why they should be involved. And so one of the first things we're going to do is really kind of get out a informational video that really highlights and markets, what the short-range transit plan is, what the objectives are, and why it's so important that they get involved. And so we'll be developing that along with working with Hillary on creating a web page for the short-range transit plan, so that when we start doing the awareness on this and start reaching out to the important social service agencies, community-based organizations, community leaders, to let them know about this listening session that comes up, we can direct them to the website and also this informational video to kind of help explain what it is and give them a better understanding, so that when they come into the listening session, they feel prepared to help us dig into and understand where the challenges are and the opportunities. And so kind of going into the listening session, we're planning that for October. It will be a virtual session. As much as we community engagement professionals want to be with the community, be in person with the community, COVID has had other ideas. So we are going to do this virtually. And we've noticed over the past year that virtual sessions can be just as productive, and sometimes we actually get a larger representation, especially when we're talking about sort of that regional planning aspect of it. People can do it from the convenience of their home. So there's advantages and some challenges behind it, but the goal will be to present the project overview and the goals, and then really have a very interactive dialogue and really understand from the community, from the transit riders, what's working for them, what's not working for them. If they're not transit riders, what could happen? What could we do to get them to maybe change some of their trips to using transit, and really understand sort of what their perspective is when we talk about how the transit agency should prioritize transit service. So we'll be having a really strong interactive dialogue with them during the listening session. And we're going to follow it up with a short survey, as David had mentioned, for those who maybe have that aha moment after the listening session where they want to add more information to us, or for those who had not had an opportunity to attend the listening session, they'll have that opportunity to share it in the survey. We'll also be doing an operators survey as well. And then when we, as David had mentioned, when Stantec develops their sort of early recommendations or proposed recommendations, we'll want to go back out to the community. And we really hope that at that point in time, we'll be able to do some in-person work. And so we're proposing some pop-up workshops. And in case you don't know what that is, it's really just going out to the community where they're already gathering. So it could be a farmer's market, or it could be, you know, a specific gathering place where they're already sort of there, and we can take advantage of the fact that they're there and reach out to them and talk to them about these recommendations. So we'll be doing that sometime in March, April timeframe. And the goal will be to vet these initial concepts and recommendations. And then, as David mentioned, we'll be leveraging that remix map and a short survey for an interactive engagement experience as well online, so that, again, community members can provide feedback and really look at the current and proposed network concept to provide their thoughts and ideas. And then lastly, obviously, once the draft plan is complete, we will be presenting to the board, and the community will have one more opportunity to make their comments to you. And I think I'll turn it right back over to David.
So now I just want to walk you through some of our initial findings. And I think a lot of this will be familiar to you all. So we start off with some analysis of route level boardings and trying to look at, you know, what's stable, what's changed over the past 3 years or so. Of course, keep bearing in mind the changes that the pandemic has forced in terms of service delivery, in terms of operations, service span, as well as changing travel patterns and demand. So one key interesting finding was that about 55% of your bus ridership continues to be carried by the most frequent lines, that is the 1 and 2 and the 6 and 11. So really showing that, you know, the workhorses, apart of course from the boosters and all those other services that carry a lot of riders for a short amount of time, those workhorses are those most frequent routes, which bolsters the, you know, the industry-wide experience that the most frequent routes typically carry the bulk of the ridership. They're the ones that are the more successful, especially along key corridors of a city or a region. And again, even the 3 of the top 5 busiest routes by boardings in 2019 were still those, you know, in the top 5 during the pandemic. So again, you know, the workhorse routes, the 6, the 11, the 1, the 2, really are ones that are successful and need to be supported. Line 20, interestingly, emerged as a top route during the pandemic in terms of ridership, and you can see how, you know, the top 5 routes carry nearly about 50% of your ridership before the pandemic, but those top 5 routes carry 66% of the ridership in the pandemic. And of course, the lines that lost, the lines that lost the least ridership, so the more resilient ones are the 20, the 1, 2, the 14, 6, and 25. So these are ones that retained ridership. And of course, the student-focused lines lost the most ridership because most of the trips were canceled or suspended. So I think Hillary wanted to speak to the next slide.
There we go. It's hard to unmute when you're sharing your screen. So when it comes to productivity, right? And I report every quarter on our passengers per revenue hour, right? And so these, I just wanted to provide a little context for these where these tables. So, you know, our boosters which go to the junior highs and high schools. They run once in the morning and once in the afternoon. And especially prior to the pandemic, when we had, sardine level packing of these buses, you would have, they'd be extremely productive, right? So 84, 90 passengers per revenue hour, right? But there's not many revenue hours. It's basically a bunch of people at once. This also lists lines 90, 91, and those are the Amtrak first last mile shuttles, right? They run once in the morning and once in the afternoon, pack them in and go. And so I just want to sort of provide that context of like, those are great and they're productive for how much service they have. But as you look at these, it's sort of like, realizing if you look at FY 18 and 19, boosters are the most productive technically and passengers per revenue hour, where they have, maybe 2 rev hours a day per line. But then the line 28 has 71.5 passengers per revenue hour. And that's a lot of revenue hours, right? From 7 something in the morning till nearly midnight. So just providing that context, the boosters and the Amtrak do show up in these, and it's good to know, but just taking a look at those other lines of how they perform, just wanted to sort of provide that context. And as of yesterday, the line 28 is back in service for the first time since March of 2020. So bit by bit, we'll see that climb up the ranks again, but just wanted to provide that context. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Hilary, for that context. And I do want to say we're working with another small transit intensive city who relies a lot on a school ridership, and they lost 90% of their ridership during the pandemic. So considering the drop in ridership that Santa Barbara and MTD experienced is much more muted compared to somewhere that lost 90%. So overall, I think of course there was a dip, but as students return, that can reverse. But it's also about thinking about what we can do differently rather than just coming back exactly as we did before. And so one way is looking beyond the peak in the last bullet point, trying to identify, are there ways that we can provide service that's frequent and reliable that attracts an all-day type of ridership. And so that's also in the next slide. What we can look at is your service area. This is from the remix mapping tool that we leverage through MTD, where you have the census tracts colored by how dense they are in terms of jobs and population. So the more sort of purplish, the more mixed use and more dense, the more red is the more jobs, and the more blue is more population based. So land use mix, basically trying to explain transit ridership. So, and then we also overlaid the most frequent routes on that map, which are the 1 and 2, 6 and 11 at the midday with 15-minute service or better. And what we found by just doing a simple spatial analysis is that about 110,000 people live within a half-mile walk or roll to these most frequent routes, and half-a-mile walk roll is about a 10-minute walk. Of course, not all walks are the same depending on the built environment, but that's a typical standard use for frequent service. And we know from your survey last year that about 42% of riders identified as essential workers. So that's a really important service that MTD provides to the community. Furthermore, 60% of these riders don't have access or don't drive or don't have access to a car. So again, without MTD, it would be a very difficult way to complete most trips. And of course, apart from cleaning and masking, which was very important during the pandemic, 80% of riders said that more frequent service was important or very important for them to getting to ride in the future. So again, that frequency element emerges, but of course with frequency, there's other trade-offs as well, because we only have so many revenue hours, so many buses, so many operators to spread out. And so part of the challenge here in this short range transit plan is how to organize that into a network that is effective and that meets the needs or the vision of your community. So here are some initial thoughts as well, and of course, please chime in. MTD has a lot of positives, especially when we compare it to other agencies that we work with. We looked at some analysis, and MTD, relative to its population, is within the top 4 or 5 transit agencies in California. That's over 150 or some odd transit agencies. So really punching above its weight. But going back to business as usual is not good enough. We want to build back better, more equitable system, something that serves the community going forward. Of course, ridership is dependent on schools, but 2/3 of riders are not students, and many are essentials workers. So we need to think about how to best serve them. And so one way is, looking at these frequent routes. Where can routes be improved in frequency? Where do we invest in the service at the peaks for the commuters? Is it an all-day, all trip type ridership that we're looking to build? And then also new things that have emerged, such as the State Street closure because of COVID, and pedestrianizing that street forces us to rethink the shuttles, the Amtrak services, and other opportunities for bus priority measures. And again, aligning service design with demand. So looking at microtransit, which you have already started to look at and will pilot in the coming year, and other on-demand strategies for low density locations, low demand times of day as well. And so the key next steps is to complete our draft of the existing conditions report, present our findings to the board. We're working on the public awareness campaign and the listening sessions and all that stakeholder engagement that will launch relatively soon, and developing the materials and the content for those activities. And so that's pretty much it. So now, looking forward to questions and discussion from you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. That was quite informative. Board members, I'm looking for comments and questions to the team here. Don't everybody speak at once.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? I'm having problems with my laptop. It sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we're good.
Okay. I think all this looks great. I really congratulate you guys on laying this out. Just a couple of things. I'm not sure how deep this is going to go when the plan is ultimately completed, but are you going to touch on the gradual electrification of our system, our buses, and when and how many we think over the next 5 years might be put into service? And another thing, a good deal of work was done on the facilities master plan, and that was a comprehensive plan in itself. But I think it might be a good idea just to touch upon that in the plan to show ultimately what we might look like in the next few years. We're certainly not going to get the funding for this within the 5-year period of this, but we're going to be working toward implementation of that plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Chair, Board Member McQuarrie. So yes, and the good news is the same Stantec team was actually involved in both our facilities master plan and our zero emission bus modeling study. And so they're very familiar with our service, with our plans for Terminal 2, and that we, how we're gonna have to roll things out. And so that's definitely something that we'll be taking into account.
Okay, thanks.
Director Limburger. Jen.
Yeah, a question on outreach. So one of the things of looking at, the routes, I really love that map. I love mapping of, the population plus the jobs. Is there a plan as well, possibly to sort of both ends of getting feedback in terms of outreach to sort of the largest employers, businesses, along the routes, as well as, having been an employee of the city and loving the city bus usage as an employee that I got, of what partnerships as well, conversations might look like. Because, if we have those partnerships, the ridership changes, that changes sort of the routes we might look at. So the both and of feedback and ridership among some of these employers?
Definitely. So great question. So in addition to just sort of general public outreach, everyone's an individual and they come and bring their own thoughts and feelings. There will be, behind the scenes meetings, sort of stakeholder meetings, right? And so with the team meeting with all the different jurisdictions, the university, the community college, both talking about their development patterns that are planned, the sort of infrastructure when we talk about that transit priority stuff, having conversations about that, and then also as employers, right? These stakeholders are also just happen to be the largest employers in our region. So absolutely. As far as outreach goes, I want to put it out to the board. We're definitely going to need your help to put the word out to your networks, to the folks the people who ride the bus and the people who don't. We want all of their input because we want them to take the bus in the next 5 years. So any help with that is appreciated. Any ideas where you're like, this organization, I know that they'd love to have you come talk about it. We'll go anywhere. I will anyway. And thankfully virtually you can do it to come and talk and spread the good word about what we're doing and trying to get good input. So any ideas folks have, feel free to let me know.
Director Tabor, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Echoing Jen's comment, that was a cool map in black and white. Seeing it in color was even cooler. I think the first bullet point under the key observations and initial thoughts was kind of lines with my thinking this past year. How can we turn this mess into something positive? And we got a lot more data from the pandemic and the changes that have happened, and it's a good opportunity not just to jump back into our old way of doing business, but to find the right way to get back into things. So I'm glad to see this kicking off, and it's probably a perfect time for it. Looking at the amount of our ridership, and who is riding, the essential workers is a term that kind of jumped to the forefront here in the past year. And without MTD, this area would have come to a literal standstill without getting those people to and from where they need to get to and from. And the more that we can do to boost that and also look for new riders is a great thing. I can't help but worry on that note that we might be missing some of those essential workers in our outreach. We have a high percentage of Spanish speaking and perhaps a high percentage that don't have internet access. So I'm worried that the typical Zoom meeting might not get out to them. I know Hillary's kind of an expert at doing this over her career. So I'm sure that's going to be something that we're looking at and looking into and trying to boost input from that sector. Thanks.
Yeah, so our sort of working backwards, the listening session will have interpretation into Spanish, definitely. All of our outreach materials will be bilingual. And one thing that we've had success with, so Gladys mentioned this a bit, but if you can't come to the Zoom, which is fine, we understand it's not everybody's going to be able to make it on that day at that time. Our website will have that interactive, sort of short survey of this is what we're looking at, tell us your priorities, right? We have seen that when we put something at a bus stop with a QR code, people do it. I mean, that's how the survey during the pandemic happened, right? We didn't go hand people surveys. They did it and actually got more Spanish engagement than on anything else that we've done. And so while people might not have like a whole computer set up at home or whatever, most people do have a smartphone and are using that to interact with the world. And so that's something that we're definitely going to be doing, and that in-person outreach hopefully in the spring will happen, but we'll be able to reach out to folks. Definitely going to work with partners in the community who have additional direct contact, but we've thankfully over the past few years have built a good feedback loop, I feel, with our our customers, with our riders. We can always do better, but that's something we'll continue to work on for sure.
Good, thank you. I just chime in with the fact of reaching out to the churches and getting notices to the churches. Again, that we're doing this at the time is a really good way. It's another community partner where actually you can reach that Spanish speaking community to great degree. Other Director Sheehan, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. As you might guess, I have a plethora of questions. So I'll start at the beginning. If you could please remind me, what was the amount of this Sustainable Communities grant?
As basically about $100,000.
Okay. And will all of this be spent on this plan, or does it include any operational funding?
It's just a planning grant. Yeah, so it's just
Planning
on the
grant.
plan. Mhm.
Okay. And you referred back to our prior short-range transit plan, and I'm sure I must have been involved in that, but my memory sort of eluded me as to that. Is it possible for context to get a copy of the prior plan? Is it just so that I can look at what we were thinking about back then in comparison? I'd just be interested to look at the kind of actions that we completed and the actions that are still outstanding. Sometimes there's never any look back at plans to see just their level of acuity. The next thing I wanted to mention is the project under project schedule. And it was mentioned that this plan lays the foundation for the next strategic plan. And as I looked on the project schedule, the final deliverables and to the board of directors will be about 15 months from now. Where does our new strategic plan fit on this timeline? Does it wait until this plan is done, or does it occur somewhere between now and then?
I'll leave that answer for Jerry.
Thank you. That's certainly something when we see the draft report, we'll be able to discuss with the Planning and Marketing Committee to get direction from the board members on how they'd like to proceed.
And what date was that again? That we'll get that chance to decide whether to start the strategic plan or to wait until this document is adopted.
What was the timeline for the delivery of the draft report?
I think late spring of next year, if I recall correctly. I mean, we're gonna get chunks of it along the way, right? So I think that was spring, summer of next year.
Okay. As we're all aware of, we do have a development committee, and even though it hasn't been able to meet for a while, this seems like something that is in its bailiwick. And when you talk about designing a short survey and creating an informational video, is there any ability for board participation, perhaps at the development committee level before these things are finalized, so that input could be gained from the board? Or is that just something that will come forward and will be shared with us?
Allow me to discuss
Please.
that with Ms. Blackerby, and we'll certainly figure out how we can work that into the timeline.
Yeah, if you think it's appropriate, I sort of do. Going out to the outreach plan, I know that at UCSB, they have a very capable institutional research team, and this is the kind of thing that they are interested in. And they also have a transportation committee. So that might be a group to work with. I don't know if there's something similar like that at City College, but that's a large portion of stakeholders. Getting towards the end here, this has to do with key observations and initial thoughts. And the first bullet point says we want a better and more equitable system. So I understand the better part, and more equitable system. I guess a little more definition to me might be helpful. In terms of equity, are there some current shortcomings? And if so, what are they?
I think we're going to be finding that out. Obviously, we hope not many, but that's what some of the existing conditions report and things like that. Something we're definitely taking a look at. That map that David showed of jobs and population. We also have the ability to. There's basically every data overlay you could ever think of for the American Community Survey and census, to see all of that. Equity can mean a lot of different things. So I think we want to look at all the different angles of that. I think in our community, we're it's a blessing and a curse that we're so constrained between mountains and ocean, right? It's beautiful. But and it also means, a vast reimagining of everything. You could only tweak things so much before you run into the mountain or the sea. So I think that's, we just want to see sort of neighborhood served and ridership and where the people are and where the needs are. And so that's something we always want to strive to be more equitable. I don't think the language was like, because we have an inequitable system, but it's something that we want to always strive to be better at and, see what the actual conditions are. So can't really totally answer that question at this point. And to your point about UCSB, I am on that transportation committee and participate, and it's a good group of people that, help spread the word and assist us in doing outreach and getting answers and things like that. So definitely working with them.
Okay, and then my last question, so thanks for bearing with me. Will there, at the end of this process, will there be specific, actionable, operational recommendations?
That's the plan, yes.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Other questions, comments? Arjun, Director Sarkar?
Thank you, Chair Davis. The only question I had was, in your outreach, you mentioned, or we mentioned operators. Will that include staff and drivers and whatnot at MTD in the survey, or some kind of participation?
That's who it's targeted toward, is bus operators, so drivers, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I suppose, I think the questions that are going to be in that survey could also apply to other MTD employees who have opinions about service, certainly, so we can expand that as well.
Okay. Any other comments at this point? Anything else from staff or the consulting team?
Yeah, I just want to mention one more thing. Now, as we go into this, obviously, when you do a 5-year plan and you're looking into the future, 5 years doesn't seem like that long, and also seems like a lifetime, especially how, how things change in our region and how things change in the world and with technology. But it can be easy to get sort of mired down in your moment in time when you're doing it, right? So we both want to make sure that this looks back at how great service was going just before the pandemic. We want to look at what happened during the pandemic. We want to work on climbing out of this hole. But we also want to look that, down the road, there will be a world in which we can have robust ridership, right? But the thing that that keeps us grounded is the fact that right now we're short of drivers, right? It's something that every employer is struggling with hiring, and we're no different. And so that's something that it's a limiting resource, right? It's a limiting factor in our service. So while we may come up with different plans, this will ultimately have to be sort of a constrained plan based on what we have. Now, obviously, we can dream bigger and think about what's possible, but at the end of the day, we are limited by the number of people who can make pull out and drive a bus. So I hate to be the one who brings us down to earth. That's normally Jerry's job, so he must be rubbing off on me, but something that we got to think about as we do this, because we don't want to promise the moon and the stars when we have a very specific number of people who can do the work right now. So anyway, with that, thanks for your questions and comments.
Well, thank you. Arjun, Director Sarkar.
Another thought that I just had was, I guess what I want to do is echo McQuarrie's, Director McQuarrie's comment on the electric fleet and having that maybe, I guess where I'm going is, I wonder, tracking those lines when we put electric buses in service, if the ridership increases. I mean, obviously that might be something you track, but how different opportunities to look at that on those lines that we put electric vehicles on, electric buses, transit.
Great idea. Yeah, we can definitely do that. And, with this order of 9 that we'll getting sometime next year, it'll be a real, I think, a moment in time to be able to see a difference and see a shift. And hopefully by that time, we're climbing out of the ridership hole anyway.
It's an interesting time because again, with the pandemic, everything has changed. We're in this constrained labor market. So it's a challenging project that you guys are embarking on. I think one of the biggest challenges you're going to have is you have a board here that's ready to rock and roll and want it tomorrow. So, we really look forward to working with you. I'm going to first ask if there's any public comment, since anyone can speak on any item on our agenda. Madam Clerk.
I don't have any hands raised at this time, and no emails have come through.
Great, thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it was quite informative. You showed us our roadmap. We look forward to engaging with you as we go forward. And as I say, we're ready to be there for you, so let us know what we can do. Thank you both. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you. And thanks to David and Gladys for all their work.
You bet, you bet. Okay, thank you, everyone. We will move then to our next item on our agenda. This is the advanced authority to execute renewable diesel fuel contract.
Yeah, I'd like
Mr. Estrada.
Yeah, I'd like to hand this off to Ms. Valerie White, our purchasing agent, to update you and make the recommendation. Thank you, Valerie.
Good morning, Ms. White.
Good morning, MTD directors, and thank you. Today's presentation is on staff's request that the board provide the authority for MTD's general manager to execute an agreement with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder for renewable diesel fuel, where it's at a fixed price of no more than $3 per gallon for no more than 2 years. So let me break this down. First, why advanced authority? MTD's procurement policy is to come before the board for approval on any contract of this magnitude. Unique or special to purchasing fuel is that the price fluctuates day to day, and fuel distributors are going to lock in a bid price for hedging the fuel, but are not going to be able to hold the fixed pricing long enough for MTD to seek board approval. So by utilizing this advanced authority strategy, MTD's general manager will have the authority to act immediately and agree on a supplier's bid that is fair and reasonable. So why a fixed price? Locking in a fixed price over a 1 or 2 year time frame will allow MTD cash flow stability, and MTD can budget accordingly. There are no surprises or budget adjustments that the day-to-day spot pricing brings. And why $3 per gallon? If the recommendation is approved today, $3 is the maximum price bid MTD would accept without coming back to the board. Really, the bid price should come in closer to a price between $2.26 and $2.29 per gallon. That's the range when comparing the difference between how the futures market has correlated with past MTD fixed price contracts. Still, fuel market's volatile, and it's affected by many factors. Placing a maximum price at $3 per gallon is really staff's attempt of preventing the necessity of having to return to the board for increased authority, which would extend the bid schedule by several weeks. Why are we talking about this now is our current renewable diesel fuel supplier agreement terms on June 30th of 2022. In order for our general manager to immediately award a bidder, MTD staff is going to first qualify the bidders with a formal solicitation by issuing a request for qualifications. And then lastly and quickly, I just want to bring up the renewable diesel fuel. MTD has aligned itself with the CARB ICT regulation, that's the California Air Resource Board, Innovative Clean Transit, which requires large transit agencies to only source renewable diesel while transitioning fleets to zero emission. Further, renewable diesel fuel correlates to conventional ultra low sulfur diesel prices And it just can be dropped into conventional diesel tanks and equipment without making costly changes to vehicles and facilities. But really, it's not a petroleum-based diesel. It derives from renewable resources like the natural fat, vegetable oil grease, agriculture waste. So it's much cleaner than diesel. And according to CARB, the renewable diesel reduces greenhouse gases up to 80%. But without going into more benefits about renewable diesel to MTD's fleet operations or the environment, I'm here regarding the sourcing of it. So again, seeking advance authority from the board to quickly award the contract when the certain conditions are met. I think now I'll conclude there and I'll answer any more of your questions.
Any questions for Ms. White? No, I don't see any. This has been very successful in the past, so
Yes.
most of us are quite familiar with what the process is here. Madam Clerk, is there anyone who wishes to speak on this item?
No comments at this time.
No comments at this time. That takes us then to a recommendation. The recommendation was to provide advance authority to the general manager to enter into a renewable diesel fuel contract for an upcoming bid solicitation, subject to the conditions as we've just discussed. Director Sheeler. You want to unmute, Bill?
I just wanted to say that I'm looking forward to that point in the future when the GM won't need advance authority for carbon fuel.
There. Well said. Okay, is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chair, I'd make that motion.
I have a motion by Director Tabor. Do I have a second? For the record, someone? Come on, you gotta get on the record. We're. Chuck, are you seconding?
I'll second.
There you go. Very good. Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Director Sarkar.
Agree to move forward with the
Yeah.
authorization.
Right, yes. Director Lemberger.
Aye.
Director Brody is absent. Director McQuarrie.
Yes.
Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
And Chair Davis votes yes. The motion passes 6-0 with one absent. Thank you, Ms. White, for the presentation and the report, and we'll move forward.
All right, thank you much.
Thank you. That takes us to item 10. This is the general manager's report.
I'll be brief. Just wanted to highlight a few items in the report. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Garcia, the Secretary Treasurer of Teamsters Local 186, for inviting MTD to its job fair a few weeks ago. It was a good event. It was good to partner with them to, try to get some more interest in our bus operator positions. Also, just an update on our SCE Charge Ready project here at Terminal 1. The SCE has moved forward with their portion of the project and if the permitting process with City of Santa Barbara. MTD is about to initiate that as well. So we have essentially it's two projects in one with that. I mean, we have what Edison needs to do to upgrade the infrastructure to support the additional 14 ports for our buses that we talked about earlier. But also MTD has some internal work to do at the same time with the driveway there at South Supply the Street and some conduit work that, essentially to hook up the chargers, that sort of thing. So it's two projects in one and they are both progressing. The other item, which was mentioned earlier that I wanted to highlight, is the return of the Line 28 out at UCSB. Very excited about that. Look forward to hopefully being able to hire more bus operators soon so that we can really get that service full throttle as soon as possible. That concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for General Manager Estrada? Director Sheeler, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. I did have one question and maybe a comment. You talked about the CARB bonus credits that MTD received for the Innovative Clean Transit for the battery electric buses. I went out and I looked and it looks like right now on the trade, cap and trade, it's about $185 per credit and it kind of varies a little bit back and forth. And how many credits and how much is that worth at this point that's in the bank? And do we have a plan as to, as that money grows, what we intend to do with it? Have we had that discussion?
We haven't had that discussion yet. At this point, we've accumulated, I think, over 200 credits. So at about 100, and I think the average about 170, 175, you're close on that. I did see 185 assumption. You have some, a good bit of money that we're accumulating that we could monetize at some point. We haven't had discussion what to prioritize with that. We certainly could. But, we're allowing the credits to accumulate at this point, and happy to have that discussion with one of the committees down the line.
Great. I'm glad to see those credits growing. And I just had a couple more things. On the news, it's a national problem trying to find people to drive buses. And in some places, they're using the National Guard or being deployed to drive school buses. And the other thing was, I don't know if you've heard about it, but I know we purchased some Chevy Bolts, and there's been some flurry of incidents of Chevy Bolts catching fire.
We're aware of that, and we are, our maintenance department is working with the manufacturer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions for Jerry at this point?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Chuck. Corey.
Jerry, on your report, the third paragraph from the end of your report regarding the South Coast Safe Routes to School program and bicycle and pedestrian program, do we plan to have a proposal to implement 3-position bike racks for our buses? This is every year I ask the question, and I'll bring it up again.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you, we have not proposed that. We have proposed it in the past consistently, and the project just does not score well, quite frankly. And we've never been awarded funding for that. Our participation is in evaluating the proposals at this point. We understand the priority. We are focusing on 3 bike racks with all of our new acquisitions, and if we can find another funding source for the rest of the fleet, we could certainly consider that. But this hasn't been the best opportunity, is what we've learned throughout the years.
Thank you. I'll just keep, I guess, nagging about this whenever we have an opportunity.
I think that's a technical term, nagging. Thank you, Chuck. Okay, not hearing anything else, we will then look at me reading 3 different closed session items, taking public comment and going into closed session. Okay, the next 3 items are closed session, starting with item 11. This is a recess to closed session, conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, subsection B1 and 54957.6. The agency designated representatives, the MTD General Manager, Jerry Estrada. The subject is unrepresented employees performance review. Item 12 is a closed session conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representatives is MTD General Manager Jerry Estrada and Interim Chief Operating Officer / Chief Safety Officer Mary Gregg. The designation is the employee organization International Brotherhood Teamsters Union Local 186. In the third closed session, item 13 is a conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9, paragraph 1 of subsection D. The matter is Elizabeth De La Torre versus Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District et al. Case number 21CV03487. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone wishing to speak on any of those 3 closed session items before we recess?
I don't have any public comments for you.
Thank you very much. Then we will basically go into closed session and reconvene to take item 14 when we come back out. Jerry, take us into closed session. We'll probably take a break here for 2 or 3 minutes as Jerry basically closes out everybody. See everybody in 3.